Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with my Week 10 predictions. We're going to go game by game inside the Big Ten and pick a winner for each game. But before we do that, I am going to take this time here to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. But now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with what was in the preseason one of the most anticipated games of the entire year. And that anticipated matchup is unranked Penn State versus number 1 Ohio State. And yeah, this is not the matchup we all thought it was going to be headed into this year. I think most people, myself included, thought Penn State would be at 1 loss at this point. But they're not. They have 3. And Ohio State, obviously undefeated. They're the best team in the country, in my opinion. And we're going to get into why I think that here in a minute when we talk about the matchups. But Ohio State is favored by 19.5, which is an objectively funny line. Because, A, it's a weird number. Like, you like... It's not even like a football number. Like it's just a weird number, 19.5, but whatever. And then the over-under for this game is 45.5. So they actually think this is going to be a low-scoring game, which, but I kind of agree with. But there's a significant possibility Ohio State just puts up a 50-burger on this team because I don't think the defense is that good for Penn State. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and break down the actual matchups here. We'll start with the Ohio State offense. And the Ohio State offense is ranked 20th in the country in opponent-adjusted points per game. They are 54th in the country in opponent-adjusted total yards per game, 28th in passing, 88th in rushing, 20th in passing per attempt, and 66th in rushing per attempt. So their per attempt numbers actually suggest that their offense is more efficient than a lot of people have been giving them credit for. Like 66 is borderline average, above average as a run game. Okay, there have been a lot of people, especially Ohio State fans that I've interacted with, that have beguiled and bemoaned the Ohio State rushing offense. When, if you look at the numbers, honestly, it's not that bad. Like, opponent adjusted, again, they're 66 in the country in yard per carry. So when you're 88th in total yards, that means you're probably not running as much as you could be, but you're throwing a little bit more, maybe. But yeah, they, generally speaking, offensively end up somewhere between 20 to 25% above what a normal game for the defense that they were playing would be. Okay, and the defense for Penn State is good in some aspects, but kind of bad in some aspects, okay? Penn State defensively is 33rd in the country in points per game relative, all right? They are 25th in the country in relative yards per game. They are 5th in the country in relative passing yards per game, which I immediately call bullshit on. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a second. As somebody who's watched multiple Penn State games this year, I don't believe that for a second, okay? The only real legitimate competent passing offense this team has played is Oregon. Everybody else is bad. Bad at passing. Nevada, horrible. Miami. Florida International, horrible. Villanova, horrible. Oregon, pretty good. UCLA, horrible passing team. Northwestern, horrible passing team. Iowa, below average to bad passing team. They haven't played anybody. And I get that even in the relative performances they're doing well, because that's 5th in the country in relative performance. But those passing offenses are so bad, I don't give a shit about that number. I don't think they have the 5th best pass defense in the country. By the way, it's the same thing. We're going to get to it later on. It's the same thing with Nebraska. I don't believe they have the 2nd best pass defense in the country either. But that's whatever. Rushing, they have the 97th rushing defense, opponent adjusted, in the country. They're number 11 in passing yards per attempt and number 76 in rushing yards per attempt. Okay, so they've got a bad rush defense and a vehemently overrated passing defense. So it's not a good combination here for the matchup-wise. All right? Now, all things considered, the matchup Ohio State defense, or Ohio State offense, Penn State defense, I would consider it a very heavy Ohio State lean. So as far as the Penn State offense versus the Ohio State defense, yeah, that's even clearer, like an absurd lean for Ohio State. Opponent adjusted. Penn State has the 105th points per game. Okay, so points per game. They have the 105th opponent adjusted offense. Because again, who have they played? Nevada, Florida International, Villanova. Oregon's got an all right defense. UCLA, bad. Northwestern, pretty good. Iowa, very good. But their relative performance is bad in the points per game category. Total yards, 102nd opponent adjusted. I mean, it's just awful. Passing yards per game, 102nd, or 112th. Rushing yards per game, 54th. Passing yards per attempt, 105th. Rushing yards per attempt, 38th. Meanwhile, Ohio State defensively, number 1 in opponent adjusted points per game allowed. Number 1 in total yards allowed, opponent adjusted. Number 3 in passing yards per game. Number 7 in opponent adjusted rushing yards per game. Number 4 in opponent adjusted yards per attempt. Number 8 in opponent adjusted rushing per attempt. Yeah, this is a nightmare for Penn State. This is a nightmare for Penn State. These two teams are not the same caliber of competition. They're not. And I am not of the opinion that this game is going to be close. I've got Ohio State 31, Penn State 13. I think Ohio State probably lets the foot off the gas a little bit. Penn State gets a garbage time touchdown, makes it look a little bit not like what it is on the field. Like, this is Ohio State's going to destroy this team. Like, it's not close. Next game up is, of course, Rutgers at Illinois, one of the heavyweight matchups of this week. Which, I mean, to be honest with you, considering the other matchups, this might be third place in terms of most interesting. Probably is, actually, now that I think about it. That was meant to be a joke, but not a great lineup this week. So this one might be kind of fun, actually. Rutgers, of course, at Illinois. Illinois is favored by 11.5. Over-under set at 61.5. Let's go ahead and jump into what the numbers say in this game here. Points per game. Rutgers offensively has the 29th best opponent adjusted points per game. They have the 43rd best total yards per game opponent adjusted, 21st in passing yards per game, and 85th in rushing yards per game, 29th passing yards per attempt, and 108th in rushing yards per attempt. So rushing numbers, because I guess they've been running the ball a bit more than they probably should. Their per attempt numbers, their efficiency numbers are significantly lower than their actual total numbers. So could potentially be an opening for Illinois to kind of force them to be one-dimensional offensively. So yeah, that's pretty interesting there. Defensively for Illinois, they have the 102nd opponent adjusted points per game allowed defensively. They have the 95th total yards per game opponent adjusted, 113th opponent adjusted passing defense, 64th opponent adjusted rushing defense, 87th passing yards per attempt, 80th rushing yards per attempt. So defensively, not great for Illinois. It's actually matchup kind of favors Rutgers a little bit. If Rutgers just wholesale abandons the run game, they could potentially move the ball and put up some points here. Because I do think Illinois' pass defense is a little bit suspect. If you look at the teams that they've played, they've all been good passing offenses. The efficiencies numbers does seem to indicate that it's not as bad as 113th. Again, there are like 133 teams in the FBS total. So that's real bad. That's horrendous. But 80th, that's middle of the pack. So maybe a little bit better than maybe the perception is, but this is not a quality defense this year. It's just not. Rutgers, I think it does slightly favor Rutgers because of the matchup, because of how bad the passing defense has been at times for Illinois this year, and Rutgers does have a quality and fairly efficient passing offense. However, offensively for Illinois versus defensively for Rutgers, didn't mean to hit the mic, but I did. Offensively for Illinois, they have the number 11 opponent-adjusted scoring offense per game. They have the 75th total yards per game opponent-adjusted, as well as the 33rd passing yards per game, 114th rushing yards per game, 11th passing yards per attempt, and 121st in rushing yards per attempt. Defensively for Rutgers, they are real bad. They do not have a single opponent adjusted metric lower than 108th in the country. They're real bad. I'm going to rattle them off here. Points per game, 114th. Total yards per game, 126th. Passing yards per game, 116th. Rushing yards per game, 108. Passing yards per attempt and rushing yards per attempt, dead last in the FBS, 134th. So efficiently, by the efficiency numbers, Rutgers has the worst defense in college football. I didn't realize that before I was looking at this, but that's bad, dog. Okay, so heavy tilt towards Illinois in terms of the offense-defense matchup. So a little bit of tilt for Rutgers offense versus Illinois defense. Massive tilt for Illinois offense versus Rutgers defense. That's kind of how I have this game playing out. I've got Illinois 38, Rutgers 31. I do think Rutgers is going to be able to move the ball and score, but when it comes down to it, they're not going to be able to stop Illinois pretty much at all. I think Illinois gets back in the win column this year, well on their way to another 9-3 season, assuming that they can take care of business in their final 3 games. Next matchup, we have Indiana at Maryland. The road does not matter in this game. Indiana is 21.5-point favorites. The over-under for this game is 50.5. And, yeah. As much as I like Maryland, I like the direction they've going. Okay. They should have a couple more wins than they do. You can make the argument that they should have 3 more wins than they do. But, yeah, they don't. This is a team that's been able to be in a lot of games and be close, but can't quite get over the hump. And this is not one of the games that they're going to keep close. I'm not even going to break this game down, really. I mean, Indiana has absurd offensive and defensive opponent-adjusted numbers. Maryland actually has pretty solid opponent-adjusted numbers in terms of defense, but offensively, it's honestly not that great. Passing, they've been pretty solid. They're 50th in the country opponent-adjusted, but everything else has been very, very bad. That is the only stat that they have in the top 100 offensively. Defensively, they're actually pretty good. Their worst stat is passing yards allowed with 64th, opponent adjusted, of course. But, yeah, Indiana's going to win this game. I mean, I like this. Indiana 35, Maryland 17. They put up some points after Indiana stops giving a shit in, halfway through the second quarter. That's my breakdown for this game. Up next, we have Michigan State at Minnesota. This game is kind of interesting to talk about. It's not going to be interesting to watch unless you're a fan of these two teams, maybe. But it's kind of interesting to talk about, nevertheless. Michigan State is surprisingly middle of the pack in a lot of their numbers in the opponent adjusted numbers. So they are 88th in points per game, 115th in yards per game. So yeah, that's bad. 96th in passing yards per game, and their efficiency numbers aren't any better. 88 and 112th in yards per attempt passing and yards per attempt rushing. So not very good for opponent adjusted type stuff. But Minnesota's defense is also pretty good. So all things considered, 60th in the country opponent adjusted points per game, 26th total yards, 49th passing, 26th rushing, 65th per attempt passing, 20th per attempt rushing. So pretty good defense for Minnesota. Not a great defense, but a good defense. And Michigan State has a below average to, at times, outright bad offense. So, yeah, that's not great. I would put a pretty solid tilt or lean towards Minnesota on the offense versus defense matchup. Now, Michigan State offensively, or defensively, pardon me, 116th in opponent adjusted points per game, 71st yards per game, 72nd passing yards, 72nd rushing yards, 99th per attempt passing, 70th per attempt rushing. So again, pretty middle of the pack, maybe pulled down a little bit by that bad points per game number. However, Minnesota offensively leaves a lot to be desired, okay? 114th in points per game opponent adjusted, 128th, one of the 10 worst offenses in football Minnesota has. But that doesn't matter that much when you're playing a Michigan State defense that's pretty susceptible to being able to be ran on and thrown on. They have 98th passing yards per game and the 132nd rushing offense per game, 114th passing yards per attempt, 130th rushing yards per attempt. So I would kind of do a little bit of a lean towards the Michigan State offense in that matchup, but it's not a crazy lean, or a tilt, I guess would be a better term. So it's kind of interesting to look at this. Michigan State probably has the advantage against the Minnesota defense. Minnesota probably has the advantage against the Michigan State offense. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit back and forth here. The line is 3.5. The over/under is 46.5, which is a very low over/under, and the line is not as big as you would think. A 5-3 pretty good Minnesota team going up against a 3-5 pretty bad Michigan State team. You figured that line to be a little bit bigger, but when you dig into the numbers, these teams are a lot closer than they appear to be. Okay. And I do think this is probably going to be a close game, but I have absolutely no faith in Jonathan Smith and the Michigan State Spartans. So I am, in fact, going to pick Minnesota to win this game. I got the score MSU 21, Minnesota 24. Hello, it's a different day. I'm wearing a different shirt. Get over it. The continuity does not exist. Anyway, next game up here is Purdue at Michigan, and this is a game that is not particularly all that interesting, if I'm going to be honest with you. This is a bad Purdue team versus statistically a way better Michigan team than I think a lot of people, myself included, expected them to be. Digging into the numbers for Michigan was a little bit eye-opening because, wow. Getting into this here, University of Michigan is, in fact, favored by 21.5 points. The over-under is 48.5 here in this game. When we look at the matchups here in this game, the Michigan offense here, they are 32nd in opponent-adjusted scoring offense. They are 18th in opponent-adjusted total yards per game, 102nd in total passing yards per game, but they are number 47 in passing yards per attempt, again, opponent-adjusted. They are number 3 in rushing yards per game and number 3 in rushing yards per attempt, Again, opponent adjusted. So elite rushing offense and a passing offense that on an efficiency level is way better than people give it credit for. Okay. Now, Bryce Hunter was real bad last week. I think it's the law of averages. I think he's going to be real good this week. Okay. But defensively for Purdue, they are 82nd in opponent-adjusted scoring defense, 96th in opponent-adjusted total defense, 98th in passing defense, 89th in rushing defense. So a little bit below average, both those numbers. But here's the thing. On an efficiency level, you see how bad they actually are, specifically in the pass game. Purdue has the 130th opponent-adjusted passing yards per attempt in all of football. There's 136 FBS teams. They are 130th. Okay, one of the 10 worst passing offenses in college football. They are 60th, actually, in rushing yards per attempt. So they're a little bit better in rushing yards per attempt than they are in totals, largely because I think teams are getting up on them so much that they're running the ball. So they're actually better in the efficiency number than the total number. And the passing is the inverse of that. Teams are getting up so high on them that they're choosing to run the ball as opposed to gaining yards in the passing game. So heavy tilt towards Michigan on the offense versus defense side there. The Purdue offense is pretty all right for year one with a team that does not have a whole lot of talent. They are 95th in opponent-adjusted scoring offense, 59th in opponent-adjusted total yards per game, 36th in passing yards per game, 85th in rushing yards per game. But the efficiency numbers are inversed again. 88th in passing yards per attempt, and 57th in rushing yards per attempt. So the raw numbers in terms of the total numbers suggest that they're actually a pretty good passing offense and a below-average rushing offense. But the efficiency numbers actually inverse that. Probably because, again, they're throwing the ball because they're behind so much because their defense is bad. Okay? As far as the Michigan defensively goes, they are 11th in the country in opponent-adjusted scoring defense, 21st in opponent-adjusted total defense, 48th in opponent-adjusted pass defense, and 11th in opponent-adjusted rushing defense. But those don't tell the full story. That's why you can't always take these things at face value, okay? They are 9th in both passing yards per attempt allowed and rushing yards per attempt allowed. They're top 10 in the country at the efficiency level in both passing offense or passing defense and rushing defense. So you can make an argument that Michigan has an elite defense. It's just that teams have been running it up on them because they have to pass the ball so much. So yeah, and this is with getting blown out by USC. So, hypothetically, if you take out an outlier game like that against what is undeniably a top 3 offense in college football, I don't know. I'm just saying. All things considered, I would still heavily lean towards the Michigan defense on that end of the spectrum as well. So I think Michigan has a heavy lean on both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball in the matchups. And because of that, I am going to predict Michigan to win this game very easily. I have Michigan 42, Purdue 21. I think Purdue puts some points up in the second half. Michigan starts playing a lot of its younger guys, probably give up another garbage time touchdown like they've done several times this year. But that's how I see this game playing out. And for our final Big Ten game of the week, we have USC at Nebraska. USC is favored on the road by 4.5 points. 59.5 is the over-under. So I think this is going to be a relatively high-scoring game here. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think when we dig into the numbers here in a minute, I think is actually probably going to end up even higher scoring than 59.5. I don't bet, and you shouldn't take gambling advice from me, but I would feel relatively comfortable taking the over on this. We'll go ahead and just jump right into the numbers here. USC, offensively, is 4th in opponent-adjusted scoring offense, 3rd in opponent-adjusted total offense, 5th in opponent-adjusted passing offense, 17th in opponent-adjusted rushing offense, and their efficiency numbers are even better. They are 5th in passing yards per attempt and 6th in rushing yards per attempt, again, opponent-adjusted. So, yes, this is an elite offense. This is one of the three, hell, maybe, fuck one of the three, maybe the best offense in college football. You can certainly make that argument. They're up there with Notre Dame, probably. I wouldn't put Ohio State in that conversation. Indiana would be another one as well. They're in the conversation firmly. Nebraska, defensively, they are 54th in opponent-adjusted scoring defense, 30th in opponent-adjusted total defense. They are 3rd in opponent-adjusted passing defense. But here's the real kicker. 105th in opponent-adjusted rushing defense. And their efficiency numbers also illustrate that dichotomy. They are 6th in passing yards per attempt allowed, opponent-adjusted, and 125th in rushing yards per attempt. They got a real bad, borderline straight up a liability, okay, statistically at least, as a run defense. And they have an elite passing defense, hypothetically. I don't think they actually have an elite passing defense. I just think the run defense is so bad, nobody's passing the ball on them. But that's just me. All things considered, even though, again, the passing offense versus passing defense is an interesting conversation, but elite offense beats elite defense. So even if I did believe Nebraska had an elite passing defense, which I don't, but even if I believed that, elite offense beats elite defense. So that still would have been a slight edge in the passing offense in favor of USC and an unbelievably massive edge in the rush defense versus rushing offense for USC. So USC, very firm, heavy lean in the favorability of USC offense versus Nebraska defense, as far as I'm concerned, at least. Now, as far as the Nebraska offense, they are 17th in scoring offense, 55th, again, opponent adjusted, 55th in total yards per game, 31st in passing yards per game, 93rd in rushing yards per game. And the efficiency numbers are effectively right on par. So they are 34th in passing yards per attempt and 87th in rushing yards per attempt. Okay, so a below average running offense and a good passing offense to create a above average total offense that actually scores pretty highly. Pretty efficient clip there. USC defensively, quality numbers across the board here, but nothing that I would quantify as good. 42nd in opponent-adjusted scoring defense, 49th in opponent-adjusted total defense, 53rd in opponent-adjusted passing defense, 63rd in opponent-adjusted rushing defense, and the efficiency numbers back that right up in the same. 58th in passing yards per attempt allowed, 61st in rushing yards per attempt allowed. So USC has an above-average defense statistically, and Nebraska has a good offense. USC slightly better, again, in the pass game than in the run game defensively. Nebraska slightly better in the pass game than the run game offensively. So it actually matches up pretty good for USC as well defensively. I would consider this a toss-up. Maybe a tiny tilt towards Nebraska, because I do think their passing offense is actually genuinely pretty good. But, tie, generally speaking, goes towards the offense anyway. So I guess it would be a slight tilt towards the Nebraska offense, and then a heavy tilt towards the USC offense in their matchup. And I am not of the opinion that this game is going to be all that close. I think USC is going to be able to handle this. I think they're going to be able to do basically whatever they want offensively. And when it comes down to it, another thing that those numbers that I like to talk about don't show you is like the actual position versus position group matchups, okay? Because USC's defensive line should dominate this game. Nebraska's offensive line is straight up a liability, okay? So because of that, I am going to go ahead and predict USC to win this game by a pretty large margin. I've got USC 38, Nebraska 28. When it comes down to it, I don't think Nebraska is the level of team to be able to beat USC. I just don't see it. I think USC is a tier above Nebraska, and if USC brings anything better than their C+ game, they probably should win this game pretty easily. And of course, we have the 6 teams on a bye this week: Iowa, Wisconsin, Washington, UCLA, and Oregon, as well as my out-of-conference picks here. Leading this off, I have Vanderbilt beating Texas. Not because it's the best thing for the Big Ten. That probably would be Texas beating Vanderbilt, because I think Texas loses at the end of the year to Texas A&M. And I think Vandy has a very good chance of beating Tennessee, because I don't think Tennessee is good. So hypothetically, giving Vanderbilt their second loss here would be better for the Big Ten and the odds of the Big Ten getting a 4th team in the playoffs. But I just don't see it. I get that Texas is at home. I just think Vanderbilt is a significantly better team than them. Next matchup, we have undefeated and currently ranked Navy versus the talk of college football this year, North Texas, and I am in fact going to take North Texas to win that game. I just think the offense is too much. Navy is really untested. They had one of the easiest schedules in college football to this point. It's just kind of the way that I see it here. Then we have Miami going on the road to SMU, and SMU's a program. You know, that's a program, dog. Like they play football down there, and people don't know about it, but they play football down there. So, yeah, but Miami, I do think, is going to end up getting the win there. I just think there's a little bit of level of a talent difference in terms of how that's going to end up working out there. And I believe ultimately in the idea that Miami is just has players on both sides of the ball that are just going to take over the game. Oklahoma is on the road at Tennessee, and I am going to predict them to beat Tennessee when it comes down to it. Oklahoma has a better offense than Tennessee has defense, and Oklahoma has a better defense than Tennessee has offense, in my opinion. The numbers, when you dig into them a little bit, the Tennessee offense does kind of appear to be a little bit overrated, in my opinion. Oklahoma has a top 3 defense in college football this year. So I think Oklahoma's going to be able to get that one and kind of save their season a little bit. Up next, the final matchup, we have, of course, the Cincinnati Bearcats going on the road to the Utah Utes. If the Big 12 wants 2 teams in the playoff, which of course they want 2 teams in the playoffs, it may be more actually now that I'm thinking about it, but that doesn't matter at this specific point in time. Cincinnati has a decent chance of being able to backdoor their way into the top 11 if they win this game and win out. It's a very, very realistic scenario. I think Texas Tech gets in either way, and I think there's a team that I'm forgetting, and I know I'm forgetting them, but that's also up in there in the Big 12 conversation. Nevertheless, I do actually honestly think Utah's going to win that game. I think the matchup is really, really good for Utah in that game. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. To this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now, with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that is that I will see you next time.